Okay, this site, Mqhekezweni, great place, has been declared a heritage site. It was declared a heritage site on the 5th of October 2012. Mqhekezweni really was a world apart, that is from Qono as compared with Qono because of those rectangular houses, in fact, the entire architecture. And what is most interesting, as the king or the regent king or this place was having this new, other person who was coming to join, the family, Madiba, to be groomed by the king. This was something that has been happening, for a long time, even before Nelson Mandela's time. Most kings, that is of the region, that is of the Xhosas, including, the Pondus, they grew up here. For some reason, this space or this place in Mqhekezweni had that role, of grooming, young chiefs to be responsible chiefs, when they took their responsibility, when they took over their responsibility, as chiefs. And Nelson Mandela, being Nelson Mandela, this very humble boy, and then was trusted by the king. He was very, very fond of him. And amongst the boys, including his son, who was staying here, but Nelson Mandela was the only one who was allowed, to go, to the king's bedroom, even to iron the king's clothes. And what is more interesting, again, as it was known that Nelson Mandela came here, to be groomed, that is for a position of being advisor to the king. During meetings, during those proceedings, when the king, had called, the village headmen and the advisors and other elderly people, that is for discussions. And during those proceedings, Nelson Mandela would be called, by the king to come and somehow, to be part of the process in order to learn. And as a result, there's so much to learn. He even states the fact that that's where actually he learned about democracy and the democratic processes that took place, during those proceedings. The heart where we are in now is the heart that Nelson Mandela shared with his cousin, Justice. He was about 9 years old. In fact, he stayed on. He was more of being adopted, by the family, because they raised him. They took him to school. They took him to the primary school, which is close by. That is the great place. And when he completed his studies, that is higher primary education, and then he went on to Clarkbury, and then sent by the chief, who was responsible for everything, for his education and everything. He called this place, his home, because truly speaking, it was his home. He studied in Clarkbury. He did his junior secondary school education, coming from this place, Mqhekezweni. And then after he had completed his junior secondary school education, he went on to Hilltown, where he completed his matric. And after he completed matric, then he went on to the University of Fort Hare, where he registered, and studied law, up until, when he could not participate. In fact, he refused, to participate. He was nominated, to serve in the school, in fact, in the Student Representative Council. And then because he believed that it was not representative, and then it was not democratic, the process was not democratic, and then he refused, to serve, in an undemocratic institution, let me put it that way. And unfortunately, then he was expelled from the university, and he had to come back home, that is to Mqhekezweni. And the regent king, was somebody who was educated himself, and he was a wise king, and was respected, by everyone. He had influence, from all over, And then he was not happy about the fact that Nelson Mandela was expelled from school simply because he did want to participate in an undemocratic process. As a result, a wife was arranged for him. And when he learned that the wife who was arranged for him was, in fact, his cousin brother, that is just his girlfriend, he simply couldn't take it. In the first place, he was not happy about the undemocratic process of the very thing that the wife was arranged for him. It was worse, the fact that it was his cousin's girlfriend. And then him together with his cousin, they decided to leave, to go away to Johannesburg and to look for work. And one would say Mqhekezweni became his home. And we remember that when his father was sick, on his deathbed, he left a wish that Nelson Mandela would be taken to Mqhekezweni to be raised by the king, because Nelson Mandela's father himself, he respected, the regent king a lot. In fact, he was actually an advisor to that king. And he wanted Nelson Mandela, to come and stay with the family so that he could be groomed, to be an advisor to the king, because that was supposed to be Nelson Mandela's responsibility, that is to take after his father, to be an advisor to the king. What is interesting, when Nelson Mandela left Qunu with his mother, that is being taken, to Mqhekezweni, as I had indicated earlier, to be raised by the regent king. Qunu, I would say, the language of today was still very backward. It was very backward. It was far different, than Mqhekezweni. And Mqhekezweni, fortunately, because a missionary station, had already been established here. And then, people here at least were more, I would say, were more modernized, and more, were more modernized, that is by, as compared, with the Qunu people. And, there was such big difference. In fact, even Nelson Mandela states that himself, that Qunu was a world apart, that is from Mqhekezweni. Because when we got here, he slept, on a bed for the first time. And there were rectangular shaped houses that he saw, for the first time. So Mqhekezweni was already, influenced, that is by the modern culture, the Western culture, in particular, due to the fact that the missionary station, had already been established here.
Okay. What I want